Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is David Novak. I have been reading Edmund Wilson, who I have not read in a very long time. I have 2 volumes from the Library of America, and I read all of these in independent editions a long time ago, and have not touched these, have not looked at Wilson for a long time. I think the last thing that I had read of Wilson was a compilation of his letters, and so that is what I remember most. And these essays, I'm not reading anything straight through, but I'm just dipping in here and there and finding it absolutely refreshing. The last literary critic that I read most recently last year was Randall Jarrell, and his stuff was fairly uneven, I would say. Before that, the last major critic that I spent time with was F.R. Leavis. And I liked Leavis very much, but I'm realizing with this that I like Wilson so much better. Oddly enough, Wilson came up on some booktuber's channel, and I can't remember who it was. They were reading some novel or something, and in the introduction to the novel, a reference was made, a quotation was made of something that Wilson had written about this author, something negative, I presume, but the booktuber had obviously didn't know who Wilson was, and was not, I think, even really familiar with literary criticism as such, and so was a little bit appalled and even angry that Wilson had said something with a slight negative tone about this favored author. And now, I don't remember who the booktuber was, and I don't remember who the author in question was. But I am very glad that I had contact with Wilson early on. I think it is owing to him that I made my proclamation a long time ago that the best criticism of poetry, or the best critics of poetry, are writers who are not poets. Now, Wilson did write poetry here and there, but you would expect every decently educated person would write poetry now and again. But I don't think Wilson is received or revered as a poet. I don't know that his work really has gotten reprinted very much or printed in the first place. But his criticism, what I'm finding in here, seems to be holding its own pretty well. So this is just from the close of an essay titled "The Pleasures of Literature." In my youth, we used to read James Huneker, who, chaotic and careless though he was, made you ravenous to devour his favorite writers. Come on. Thank you. I'll start that again. In my youth, we used to read James Huneker, who, chaotic and careless though he was, made you ravenous to devour his favorite writers. Later on, we read T.S. Eliot, who, though as sober as Huneker was boisterous, still stimulated the appetite for poetry and made the poets seem full of exciting surprises. But Eliot's criticism was completely non-historical. He seemed to behold the writing of the ages abstracted from time and space and spread before him in one great exhibition, of which, with imperturbable poise, he conducted a comparative appraisal. This was, of course, an intellectual triumph, and his essays had their very great value. But it was a feat that could only be performed at the cost of detaching books from all the other affairs of human life. And the author of this complaint used at that time to try to encourage the practitioners of literature to interest themselves in the development of society and in the larger events of the world, as most great literature, after all, has done. Even the non-moral and non-doctrinal Shakespeare, whose detachment seems so bafflingly consummate, presents issues, as Orson Welles' Julius Caesar has recently emphasized, of which, if you had read only Eliot on Shakespeare, you could never have had any notion. The economic disasters of the 30s have had, therefore, a useful effect in compelling attention to the social significance of novels, poems, and plays. But the trouble is that social significance has now become an obsession. Today, one is confronted by the spectacle of a philosophico-social criticism of a character purely analytic, which almost invariably comes to negative conclusions, and a politico-social criticism which, without making even the attempt of the other to ascertain the position of the writer in the bigger historical frame, is content to give him a high or low grade corresponding to the degree of his readiness to subscribe to the mechanical slogans of this or that political faction. The young, usually subject to exaggerated enthusiasms, are today not enthusiastic. Not enthusiastic, that is, about books. They merely approve or disapprove when a book does or does not suit their politics. But seriously, I think it a pity that they do not learn to read for pleasure. They may presently find that an acquaintance with the great works of art and thought is the only real insurance possible against the barbarism of the time. Just a little something from Edmund Wilson. Thank you for stopping by my channel.